So most welcome all of you to this webinar. The title today is Diversity and Equal Opportunity in Metal Component Manufacturing Sector, Experiences and Reflection. And this is a very exciting group of guests we have today. Today it's the 32nd webinar in the webinar series. So let's see, it worked before to change picture. Now it works again. So we welcome all of you. We have 32 registered participants today, and we have 6 countries here, and we're very happy for that. We had a question in when you signed up, and it was about what organizations you're working, and over 20 of you worked in male-dominated organizations, 3 in balanced, and 5 or 1 in a female-dominated area. So that's a background to the guests. Some words about the WebLearn project. As I said before, we are here thanks to the KK Foundation. And we had the idea to create short, just-in-time, very focused webinars for metal and polymer component manufacturing area. So far we had 32 webinars. We have had over 1,100 registered participants and from 51 countries. So we are very happy for that. You can read more at the website. So today it's me and Esan. We are the moderators, but the most important is, of course, our guests today from Scania, from RISE, from Volvo, and from the School of Engineering. You will meet them all very soon. The agenda, soon we will start the presentations, and after the presentations we will have a panel discussion, and we really hope that you will engage in that discussion because this is kind of a hot topic, I think. We will end this at 11:30. So the usual things, please have the microphones turned off during the meeting, and please engage in questions. You can put them out there already when you have them. One thing we really want with these webinars is to give the possibility for interaction, for answers and to be given and discussions. So please do that in the panel discussion. We are recording, and we are always sending out the recordings after, but we are not recording the discussions. So you can say whatever you want. So, and here you have the chat function. You see the video button, and probably you all know this already because we all have done this a lot. But anyway, now, oops, sorry. Now I will stop share and introduce the first guest, and that is Esan. Please, Esan Ghassemali.
Thank you, Madeleine, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today. My name is Esan Ghassemali, and I thought before I go into the topic, I have a very short introduction about myself. 1983 is the year I was born, and 2014 is the year I came to Sweden, Jönköping, as a postdoctoral fellow. Right now, I'm a docent and associate professor at the School of Engineering, Department of Materials and Manufacturing. If I want to say where I am from, well, originally I'm from Iran, but I've lived in many countries. So I call these countries, any country that I have lived for, let's say, more than 3-4 years, I can call it my homeland. So you see a number of countries I've been living in. That shows also the diverse cultures and language that I have been exposed to. What I love, football and swimming. I used to play and swim professionally when I was younger, as you can also roughly see in the picture. Right now, I'm also a leader of Sub-Environment 2, Sustainable Materials and Manufacturing and Cast Components within SPARK. And SPARK is a research and educational environment at Jönköping University, supported by also KK Stiftelsen. knowledge foundation in Sweden. Talking about my passion and hobby, it's alloy development and materials characterization. If I want to talk about scientific manners, but also as a hobby at home. I love to work with microscopes when I'm at work, but also I like to work at telescope to look at not only small objects, but also bigger objects on the sky. Enough about me. Let's go to the topic of the diversity, and specifically I have some slides about gender balance. These are results of a study in 2021 from European Commission and also 2020 European Commission about the share of or fraction of women who are active or working in the field of science and technology in Europe. As you see on the right slide, more than 50% of women are the fraction of women in science and technology in the Europe is more than 50%, which is a good number. You see also the demography, how this share of women working in science and technology is spread across the Europe. Surprisingly, you see people in the East European countries are the fraction of women in this sector is much higher than Central Europe. In North and West Europe, we also have pretty good situation, but we can improve. So these are good numbers, might makes us happy that we have a pretty good gender balance. But when you go to metal and mining sector, which is the sector that we are focusing on today, especially metal sector, and if you look at the fraction of women who are active in executive boards or management teams that are deciding, have a decision-making power, the numbers are not very nice. You see that in most regions around the world, we have less than 20%, less than 15% is a fraction of women who are active in decision-making positions in companies, especially, but also in academia. Surprisingly, you see that you might think that in Middle East and Africa, the situation could be worse, but the numbers show that they are actually the most advanced when it comes to situations to having fraction of women in decision-making positions in companies and also academia. In Europe, we are in a fair situation compared to others relatively, but we can, of course, make it much better. The numbers are not ideal at all, and that shows that we have to do something. Why should we do something? I try to explain in the coming slides. If we look at how European Commission and Horizon Europe is looking at gender balance, they categorize it in two main categories. One, we have gender balance in research teams when we do research, and also, of course, education. So when we talk about research project, in the management team of research project, also the members of the project, there's a need to have a gender balance for certain reasons that we will talk about soon. And also they also emphasize that that is not the only aspect that you need to consider when you formulate your research projects. It's also how you consider gender balance in research itself. So how do you think your research activities and educations can affect different genders in the society? That is something that needs to be considered. And the reason is that there has been several studies showing the effect of that you might think that are, with the first glance, you might think, okay, gender has no effect on it, but it actually has. An example is that if you look at the car crashing tests that many companies do, almost all male crash test dummies, they are actually a male body. They're representing a male body. That means that when they test the cars for crashing, the injuries and the risk on the special risk that can happen to bodies of female and woman has not been specifically considered in research. That is one example. Another interesting example that has been done, I think, in 2017 or 18 is a snow removal procedure in Karlskoga. It's a community in Sweden, a city there. And you might think that what does snow removal has to do with gender balance? I explain it that in Karlskoga, before 2017, they started to clean, the procedure was that they started to clean snow removal from major roads where cars are driving. And Only then, after the major road, they were starting to clean streets and bus stops and pedestrian ways and also bicycle paths. And another study showed that actually women in especially those regions, of course, it's probably the same for other regions, use public transport, bicycle and walkways more than men. So that means that snow clearing process favored cars users, which means men. So that was an unintentional biased cleaning procedure that affected the life and work of female and woman in the society. So they changed the routine of the work. They prioritized pedestrian walkways and bicycles before cleaning the roads. They prioritized schools and major employees before major roads. And the result was that the city became more accessible for everyone, including those with disabilities or special care needs. And also it benefited the city economy with decreasing the injuries due to slippering and such. So that is one small example that's showing that if you think outside the box, there are many aspects in the research that can affect gender balance, and gender balance can have an effect on. Another example, in many areas around the world, you see that unfortunately still women and girls are doing many traditional work, including, for example, bringing water from resources to their home or washing and cleaning. And that means that this part of the society, they do not have enough time to do other important matters, for example, taking care of their own education and other stuff. And the result of that is that if we only, in these areas, if we only focus on improving the education without improving the infrastructure, we actually favor and bias more education for the male fraction rather than female. So these need to go hand in hand, that we need to make sure that women also are free from these traditional work and the infrastructure is improved so they have time for education and other duties as well, other practices as well. And especially in these societies, it's important that women are included in decision-making and research-related activities in order to make sure that the voice of them are heard and their views are implemented in the society. Talking about diversity with gender balance is also a part of it, and work environment, it has a number of advantages, most of you know, but just to highlight, it can improve the creativity and innovation. When you have diversity, people with different type of mindset, they have, it can improve the creativity and innovation by sharing different ideas and cultures. Also, it can increase the productivity. Studies have shown that in diverse work environments, the productivity, because of different cultures and because of the cooperative culture that comes into effect, the productivity can increase up to 35% in most industries. It can reduce the employee turnover. When there is inclusion and diversity in the work environment, people are more happy where they work, and there is less turnover and changing employees within the organization. You can connect to a wider range of customers when you have people from different cultures or different diverse environments coming to you and work in your workplace. All of them or each of them have connection to different consumers that can be useful for the economy of the organization. You can have increased revenue, which is again related to cooperation between different cultures. And as I mentioned, you have more internal cooperation, because when you have people from different diversities and different cultures and genders, there is more need to cooperate together in order to succeed in the company. Of course, there are challenges related to that. You can have unfair prejudices because, of course, there are people who might, individuals who cannot tolerate people who have different ideas compared to them. So that is something that the management has to take care of and be aware of. There could be communication barriers because different cultures and diverse areas can have different language capabilities and skills. That also needs to be taken care of. And because of different cultures, they might be different interpretations. So how do you communicate within the organization is also very important to take care of in order to avoid different or wrong professional etiquettes or interpretations. So What is the solution? We will talk, I mean, other speakers will talk about that. We will bring also some examples, but what I can say, we always talk about manufacturing. What about we also start using the word manufacturing in order to highlight the need of having more diversity in this field of study? That was from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ehsan, for that. Keep all your questions for later, and we will get back to you. So now we would like to introduce Jessica from Scania. It will be so interesting to hear your presentation. My journey from a failed academic to unemployed housewife to PhD and expert engineer and associate professor. Isn't that something? So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So, I wanted to change slide now. Okay. So my name is Jessica Ersberg. I work at Scania in Södertälje as an expert engineer, and Ehsan mentioned passion. So I must say that my passion is probably cast metals, the manufacturing and properties of cast metals when it comes to work. I am also an associate professor in materials manufacturing, specialization casting at Jönköping University. My background is from KTH. I have a family, 3 kids and a life companion. And on my spare time, I play the violin and I have meals with friends, including beer, wine, and food, and lots of talk. I am a fan of the sportsteam Hammarby, so I go to the soccer games and the bandy, that is the ice sports bandy game. And I also love going to live music events of different types. My way to where I am today, the position I reached, has not been so straight and quite bumpy, illustrated by this Scania image. It was okay until a few years into my PhD studies when I got my first kid. I was not so young, I was almost 30 years old, but quite a lot changed the attitude from the environment where I changed when I got the kid. So in my opinion, without a fair discussion, the supervisor just let me know that I would never manage to finish a PhD in a decent time. So then if you don't feel that you have the trust from the environment, for me it was best just to not challenge that and just put together what I have, and wrote this licentiate thesis. And I, of course, thought that finding a job with my background would be not easy, but at least possible, but it wasn't. So I applied for quite many positions for which my profile appeared to be relevant. But it took me like 7 years where I divided my time between temporary positions of different types, studying human sciences, giving birth to 2 more kids, and being then a housewife, at least on part-time, until I decided and could find a way to return to academy. So in 2010, I returned to another department that I was at before and finished a PhD in, I think it took me 8 months to put everything together and defend it. So the total time was quite normal. And then after that, everything got much easier. So in a couple of years later, I left academy for industry, and that environment was really working well for me. So of course I met situations where I had to handle this being a woman in a male-dominated field, but I have a very strong support from managers and a very large freedom to do whatever work we thought was needed to reach the level of expert engineer, which is the highest expert specialist level at Scania, and also being accepted as an associate professor almost exactly 10 years after my PhD defense. These experiences perhaps illustrate how gender-related expectations limited in my possibilities. But I cannot, as an individual, know if I am treated in a special way because I'm a woman, or in my case, I maybe a non-normative woman with a loud voice and not so interested in like pleasing, which could be considered as a female characteristic. Or I could just be considered to have a bad attitude or a low potential, but also these can be like gendered expectations. And these gendered expectations may be one of the problems with the inequality in our field. I have been discussing this a bit. When the industry as such try to present their environment like less dirty or less noisy, just to appeal to women, that is disturbing me, because the approach reproduces gender stereotypes. If women must be protected from the noise and dirt, then it is women are something else than the men already working there. And women working in that field, I have been working in industry since I was like 18. So if I have managed that, but other women can't, then I am not a woman, or at least some other kind of woman. There are similar attitudes regarding totally other environments. I spend, as I said earlier, my time at soccer games and at extreme metal concerts. And I am there. I see that we are about 30% female there, but constantly I am told that female don't visit these arrangements. So there are strong norms for gender, and I seem to break these, as many people do. So I can cite an important source that I will come to soon, Ain't I a Woman? Could gender studies help us understand personal experiences? Gender studies in the field of engineers is maybe not very well seen and a bit strange, but it is a field that try to not taking gender and the behavior and whatever as for granted, but how can we investigate when gender is influencing stuff, and how gender can give access to power in some sense? So we try to go through some gender study theories. One can state that the patriarchal structure we had begin like 4000 before Christ, because we could see that women and men were equal until people started to own things. So the need of inheritance made fatherhood established. And then reproduced in different way through the ages. Ain't I a Woman? That is a speech held in a women's right occasion by a Black woman, Sojourner Truth. And she was not really anything as the woman that should be given rights. She was a slave. She was really working hard and everything, and she didn't need to be protected as the white women, rich women did. And her speech is very interesting. Read it. It is available online. A bit later, Mary Wollstonecraft stated that women had the same intellectual capacity as men and should be given the right to study. same access to education as men. And this is maybe not a question in Western countries anymore, but for sure in other parts of the world. This is a woman I learned about when I prepared this. She's an Iranian woman stating the same thing as Mary Wollstonecraft, that everybody needs the same access to education. Simone de Beauvoir, she stated that women cannot be seen as a separate type of person, but only as like a non-man. And that is, of course, limiting the possibilities of being understood. And Judith Butler then said that we reproduce this pattern by perform the expected gender. So performative gender is a very important concept. And this R.W. Connell stated that there is a hierarchy between masculinities, that the ideal masculinity is like a white rich man, and then there are some kind of lower ranked man of other sex than heterosexual, and with other sexuality than heterosexual, and also other so-called races. And Freud say that men can only see women as either madonnas or mistresses, and then they cannot see any other complex property of a woman. This woman, Kimberly Crenshaw, used, for example, the anti-woman concept that we always have to consider everything. We have gender and sexuality and race and class, physical ability, and so on. So intersectionality is probably the best concept to use when we discuss how to get a diverse culture. Let us then elaborate a bit on this. If we believe that men and women are equally intellectually capable, there are biological differences, but this does not necessarily control neither behavior nor intellect. And also the variation within the group, men respective women, are probably as large as between the groups. The social expectancies of how men and women looks and dresses and behaves are there. And when we adopt to the expectations, we do it naturally, subconscious, and easy, but for most people. And by doing that, we perform the gender as both Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler described. We reproduce the patriarchal structure, and we don't do this on purpose, and no one is like mean. It's just how culture works. Men are the norm in the patriarchal structure. The system is built to deliver what the men, especially the high-ranked, white, heterosexual, wealthy men, need. So inheritors, sex, power, and wealth. And the system has been maintained by not giving equal access to education and career paths. And we also value different type of labor, that is productive labor, which we do in industry, and reproductive labor that we do at home. So the productive labor has been much more worth. And the last control mechanism is the control of sexuality, which is for real a strong control tool in many parts of the world. We can mention female circumcision and so on, if we want to go like brutal. And also not so brutal thing is that the society, and especially in workplaces, expect people to be heterosexual. So when women approaches these male fields, we like mess with the structure. So the working women needs to relate to like 3 hierarchies. We still need to be valued by men. So we have the Madonna mistress thing, and we also need to be a working colleague. So we have the male hierarchy to relate to. And if we want something to happen, the transformation must occur both in work life and in home life. So both men need to get a larger responsibility, a larger opportunity to be a family person, and women need to be a career person. So I'll jump a bit, just so I see, Madde, that you are this heterosexual logic, assuming that men and women primarily see each other as sexual beings, have to be questioned and challenged. So we also need to see every person as an individual, not the representative for their gender. In my work life nowadays, I rarely feel being treated different than male colleagues, and we can discuss that for a bit. I can be too old or too non-normative stereotype for being neither Madonna nor mistress, or I am recognized as an expert, so that makes me more equal because we take the same space or so. And that can also make me like an honorary man in some way. Or is it so that in my field where I am active, there is really a very including attitude? Let us hope that would be the best explanation, I think. So we can discuss more later.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Now we will jump to another perspective from you, Åsa, from RISE. Please, welcome. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I will make a short time travel. In many ways, I would say that my experience are quite as much as Jessica's. Very short, my personal timeline. I started by being born in Örebro 50 plus years ago. This would be a timeline of a professional career of about 30 years.
So, sorry, Åsa, now you're not sharing.
I'm not sharing, sorry.
Now you're sharing.
Now, yes.
Perfect.
Thank you. So I was born in Örebro, right in the middle of the starting point of this Swedish map. I moved on to Uppsala in order to start studying chemistry in 1988 when I was 19. Then I made the next step, the next move. I went to the bit northern part of Sweden, to Sandviken to work in the steel industry for a few years. I then landed in Småland in 2005, and I don't have 14 children, but 4. So just like Jessica, I spent some time taking care of my family and my children and not having a professional career. But then 10 years ago, I moved on to Jönköping and started to work at RISE Research Institutes of Sweden, where I am active today as well. And I will say something about each of these 3 professional environments: the academy, the steel industry, and a research institute. So if we start with the academy, I started to study inorganic chemistry in 1988 in Uppsala. And the first question that arose was, aren't there any women here? Among the students, it was something like 50-50. And I've learned later on that in chemistry, it has always been a sort of equal gender balance, 50% male and female students. But actually, if I remember right, during 3 years of undergraduate studies, we had 1 female lecturer, 1. So that was the questions, where are the women? I went on with a PhD, and as you can see, that was some time ago. I found this wonderful picture from 1996 And I had to have a close up on my computer, as you see, that some years ago. But I started my PhD, and you can conclude that period in like, of course, female students are great, but just as in undergraduate level, we were about 50% female PhD students. And everybody was positive, but nobody was prepared, you can say. Nobody actually had thought about what would the consequences be of having 50% female PhD students. And especially some of the men were not prepared at all. For instance, when you came into the lunchroom, the professor would pat his lap and say, "Come and sit here with me." Or after a presentation, some of the male students could say, "Well, she made a nice presentation, but it was rather girlish." And nobody commented this. No reactions came from the senior staff. So nobody was prepared at these reactions, really. And at the same time, I could watch the few female lecturers working extremely hard to cope with their careers and their work, while several of the male lecturers were sort of laid back in the older generation. So it was obvious for me that this was not on equal terms, actually. When I had finished my PhD, I went to another university for a short period as a lecturer. And then the standard comment I got there, "But surely you must be a student," because I was a woman and I was still young. So that was, well, my experience from the academy in the 90s. Aren't there any women here? And female students are great, but, and once you have come that far that you are a lecturer yourself, you get the comment, "But surely you must be a student." I went on to the steel industry and I started my career as a research engineer. And then I realized that in the industrial company where I worked at Sandvik, the management was really struggling with gender issues, and as I think in a good way, in a very good way. For instance, the first thing I heard when I got out in the production was, "Now we have finally removed all the calendars." They have worked a lot with the working environment, both in research but also in production, to remove all these remainders of the sexist environment that had been dominant earlier on. I started to work as a department manager 2 years later. But I was still in the research department. I was told, and I also experienced from colleagues, that it was a bit tougher in the production line. Female engineers were strongly encouraged to apply for higher positions, but the research department was still a few years ahead. But there were strategies for supporting career of both parents. Many research engineers were married to each other. And then the strategy from the research organization was that, well, we have to support both these two careers. So when I realized that it didn't work for me as a mother to work as a department manager, I talked to my boss, and I was offered another position as a senior specialist. Because, of course, it should be possible to combine work and parenthood. That was the main comment from the research department. So I think this period was a very positive period, because you can see that the management worked hard to remove the sexist structures, but they also worked hard with actually doing things to promote the careers of both men and women, and to promote an equal parenthood. In spite of this, I retired from this position. I gave up my professional career for 7 years for private reasons, because my husband was even more keen than I on getting a professional career. So his career got first for 7 years, and mine was sort of held. In 2012, we moved to Jönköping, and I started a new career, a new position as a senior researcher at RISE Research Institutes of Sweden. Still, I have that position. I work mainly with the foundry industry. And as you can see in the top picture, sometimes it's hard to know who's a man and who's a woman in the foundry business. But there are some difficulties, of course. There were some difficulties, some practical difficulties, I would say. There were no women's clothing available. So I couldn't find any clothes that fit my body because I'm a woman, I'm quite small and quite thin. So I really had to remake all the clothing for my own purposes. This is not the case nowadays. You can find female clothing in the foundry industry as well, but I didn't at the time. My experience so far in the foundry business and in the research institute, working with foundries as well, is that we're happy for anyone that will work here. It's quite hard to find the right competence. You have to compete with lots of different employers. It's nice that somebody will come to work here. It doesn't matter that much if you're a man or a woman, or if you have a different cultural experience. We know that we have to attract everybody. So we do quite a lot of work in attracting young girls, attracting women employing for positions, and also to keep the women working here to go on with their careers. But still, I would say, if you don't look for it, you won't find it. Today, I must say that I don't experience any discrimination at all to me as a woman. But what's the reason for that? Could it be as simple that as I am getting older, I won't be confused with a student anymore? Is it that I have gained a position as an expert, as Jessica said? Or is it so that I'm totally blind for any discrimination against other women? And one short example of that is when I took part in the first salary revision, lönekartläggning, done at my department. We realized, surprisingly to all of us, that for employees over 40 years old and older, there was a complete difference of men's wages and women's wages. And nobody had known about this. You had to look for it, and then you can find it and do something about it. So that was the short version of my professional life, Madde.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Åsa. We will go to the next presenter, Katarina, please.
Thank you very much, Madeleine. I will just share some few reflection and personal experience regarding role models and supporting action. And I will try to be short so we can have space for discussing together this topic, if possible. So a little bit of my background. I'm an Italian that studied there at the University of Trento, and I got my PhD in 2010. And then I moved in 2014, thanks to an individual fellowship to Sweden. That was the research institute called SP at that time. And I moved for an academic career here in Jönköping University in 2015, becoming a professor in 2019. And already in my, let's say, career development, I had two opportunities that were leveraged thanks to special enablers for gender balance. And that was during my PhD, I had access to a special European PhD network because I was one of the few female students at that time in the field. And the fellowship that funded my mobility to Sweden was reserved for young female researchers. So that's why I would like to share my experience with these gender quota enablers. But I would start with role models. And I start very early because, first of all, you have to spark the interest to STEM. And so if I think about my teacher during school, from elementary to high school, all of them, 98% of them were female, except the chemistry and physics one. Those were male. And then at the university, I studied at the materials engineering department, and there was 45 professors between full professor and associate professor. And at my time as a student, only one was female. So wonder what, when I had to choose for a supervisor, I ended up with a male. And during the PhD was the same. And then I got my fellowship, and my two mentors were also, not surprisingly, men. And if I look around today, what are the most famous scholars in my field of research? Well, look at the picture. They all fit the same. Look at the picture of the whole slide. They all fit the same criteria. So how can you not be biased by that? Not only they can see themselves in the group, but even more, you cannot see yourself as a young student in that group. So why are role models so interesting for me? Because those are the people where you take inspiration, and if you are lucky enough to have one nearby, also guidance, certainly for scientific quality and performance, but also to set your future goals, and also to learn all the soft skills and little manners on how to interact in your job. So reflected in who they are and how they behave, you take those input in creating your own ambition, and also in my case, my own role as a scholar, of course, also my scientific approach, but even more my role to have an impact to the society, and you shape them a little bit by looking up to the role models you have at your disposal. And looking at the soft skill, I've studied engineering, but to be a scholar, you need a lot of other qualities. And then again, you learn from the environment you work in. So everything from the pedagogical approach and the teaching approach, the body language when you interact with people, the work-life balance, the coaching skills to younger peers, or interaction to the larger society. You look up at them, and if you want it or not, you end up to pick up some of that manners in your own manners. And if I have to think about my role models, the one of the previous pictures, and if I look especially into the work-life balance, what I ended up is that they are all overworking. And I think that none of them had a career break to start a family, as shared by Oza and Jessica before. So what does it tell me? What can it teach me in handling these issues? Actually, nothing. But I am of a newer generation than the previous speaker, so I live with gender quota actions all my career, and these are both an opportunity that I took as soon as I saw some around, but they're also a stigma, and we should never forget that they are necessary at the beginning, but they should be removed as soon as they're not useful anymore, because they bring a stigma with it. So if you look at the opportunity, they open the doors where they are closed. They force people to look at diversities in choices and in recruitment, and therefore they introduce diversity when it's not present. So for sure, they accelerate a more balanced gender's presence in the academy, in my case. But they bring a huge stigma, because the gender quota means that you are not compared or compete with a full scale of your peers, and therefore is not a fully merit-based evaluation. You have less competition, and that brings to you, and people looking at you, they look at you differently, and therefore it brings in an imposter syndrome. Academics already suffer about that for many reasons, and female academics suffer about that even more. And that brings people to overcompensate for that, being louder and louder in our voice, and working or thinking that is needed to overproduce to be seen. They also bring another stigma, that is the gender washing. We have been probably hearing the greenwashing today is a problem. Well, the gender washing, I think, is also a problem, in the sense that gender quota are one action, but they're not changing the working environment. They're just changing the number counts, maybe. And that means that don't think that this is enough. We have to go farther than that in changing the work environment. And also, when you become one of the ones sitting in the decision-making place, then you end up to getting extra tasks, because this gender quota now are required everywhere, from project application to committee to boards and so on. And so you ended up to be assigned too many tasks to be able to represent a balanced gender in many places. And that is also unfair. So I want just to spark a little bit the discussion by asking, is gender balance just a head count? Or should we move also with this enabler a little bit farther and deeper? Madeleine, you're muted.
No, I did it. Sorry. We will come back to that very soon. But first we will introduce our next guests, and that's the crew from Volvo, Sandra and Lars-Erik and Ann. Please put your camera on. There you are. We said earlier that we need to have you close together to see you all. There they are. So most welcome, all of you. And you will give your practical case on how you are working, and we are looking forward to hear all about it. Please.
Unmute, Sandra.
So
We were double muted.
yeah,
Okay.
you hear us now.
Yes, we hear you now.
Good. Represent us.
Yes, start with me. Ann Johansson, I'm a department manager at the after treatment. Sandra Sjöqvist, I am department manager of the molding line.
And Lasse Tengman, department manager of melting shop. We will talk about our work with diversity and inclusion and the prerequisites for being a competitive company and being an attractive workplace for everyone. It's our goal.
And a conscious and driven management is always a start in a change journey, and not at least in a journey like this. Often these issues end up on the sidelines in many activities, or are delegated to a committee or something like that. We want to show how these questions raise awareness and how we have worked practically with this in our teamwork at all levels within the foundry and at Volvo Powertrain in Skövde. But first, we will give you a short picture of Volvo in Skövde,
Yeah.
the foundry.
So would you like to share your PowerPoint?
You're not doing that?
Yes, no,
Oh.
Going well now.
no problem. Try again.
It was the last button. Now you can see my screen at least.
Yes.
Yes.
There it is. Thank you.
Yes, now
good.
we are
Thank
on.
you.
Now,
So this is the Skövde plant. We are approximately around 3,700 today. And then we have 20% women. I think that will be nearly 25 now. So this is an old picture. We are quite a big area. But what we're going to talk about is the foundries. It's the orange one here. So we have two foundries in Skövde. And we will go into the subject instead of Volvo Skövde.
The foundry in Skövde is AB Volvo's only foundry for cylinder heads and the cylinder blocks. We are about 700 employees. Our processes includes all from melting, making, sand courses, casting, and after treatment. We are in a huge transformation regarding new products. As you all know, future trucks will be driven by other energy sources. This is a short introduction of our company and the function that we are representing. But now back to the topics of why we are here. In 2013, we began to work with our culture regarding safety. And with that, we realized that it had a very big impact on our performance. This led to start working with diversity and inclusiveness in the foundry management team in about 2015. We started an education for the foundry management team together with a consulting firm company specialized within diversity and inclusion.
And 3 years later, so 2018, we realized that we needed something to hold on to when working with the rest of the organization. We realized we will never be able to manage either spreading competence or managing behavior if we don't have the competence ourselves. We cannot be in the hands of consultants. We created a book and a manual with a deeper theory and facts along with practical exercises. And before the creation of the book, we collected material through interviews of employees, gathered facts from our own employee surveys, and used the consulting company for general statistics and facts. And for the layout, we had help from a communication and design company.
But we also work with our strategy and vision in the foundry, and here we have included all this in both, I would say, security and health, but also this inclusion and so on. So in every cornerstone we take this with us to see how can we put in this in everything of what we work with every day. So it's a sustainable business, also sustainable people, embrace change that affects the man and woman very much. Participatory culture, very hard word, involved culture, and there also again the people. And of course we should have joy on our workplace. So this is nearly very well connected to what we have to do in this work.
Yes, if we start to look a little bit more on the book, we see the layout of the book. It's the flow to be able to get through the book in an educational way with all employees in their work team. The contents consist 8 chapters of fact mixed with practical exercises and interview with staff who are taking a stand. Example of chapters are we have a part who is about sick facts. Do you know that a waiting time for an ambulance is longer for a woman than for a man? It's about 7 minutes average in Västra Götalands län. One chapter is about diversity, one about norms. We are handling inclusions, and we are talking about the Swedish Discrimination Act, harassment and role models, and we are talking about the team.
But when we do this, we have to have our manager with us. It's extremely important that the management group is beyond this, because as we learned, if we don't take the stand of this, we will not get near to every people. So this was one of the topics that the foundry manager, as you see, both the former and the new one, is on this board and on this journey. So because we have problems at Volvo Skövde, 10% of our people feel harassed this year. And there's quite many in when we have 3,700 employees. We also talk a lot about the culture and how we talk to each other and how we introduce people. The last year we took in 1,000 new employees only to Volvo Skövde. And if we don't start immediately, they will get into the bad habits, I would say. We have to change it from day one. if we want to come further with this.
And as Ann said, one of the chapters were norms and what standards we have and what it gives us is a question that we can ask ourselves. What confidence does the language we have give each other? Do we trust each other? And for example, if you're being teased or bullied by a colleague, how are you going to trust that person, the very same person, in the daily work? And regarding safety work, as we said, we have a very different working environment, and we need to be able to trust our colleagues. So how do we do that if 10% are feeling harassed?
If we look into the chapter about inclusion, then we have a couple of questions we have worked with. If we start to create a diversity, how do we get the inclusion? What do we get out of a diversity that is not included? Culture is saying hello for us. It creates, it's the beginning of inclusion. What is the feeling when you are included, and what does it give in the results? When we have been working with the different groups, we have, for example, asked the questions, how do you feel when you are included and excluded? We have worked with post-it exercises, both individuals and in groups, and started discussions around that. And how do we create that in the different teams you're working in? Many questions like that. One of the chapters is about role models. And if we only are white men, we are no women, none of foreign descent, we have no people with disability. How do we get differences to come to us, to want to work here in our foundry? If we are only white middle-aged men, and we realize that that's not enough. So how do we become an attractive employer if we cannot show that it's a workplace for everyone? It's about creating awareness of what it means to be a role model, and that we all are role models in one way or another.
And what we have done so far, except creating this book and get a lot of education from others,
is that we have been working with the entire leadership in the foundry. It's about 35 people, both production, engineering, maintenance, yes. And we've been going through this book chapter by chapter, both working with the facts and exercises.
And the meaning of this is to discuss this in a safe place where with people you work with every day, who you know very, very well, and when you can discuss this in very we took out 3.5 hours every time, and we have 5-6 meetings with this, and you can get down quite deep into yourself and what you stand for. That makes you also a lot of more confident when you go out to the groups, to the employees, and you should take up these discussions. So we have worked now for 1 year with the leadership, nearly, and I think it's getting results of this. We see a lot of more people with a different gender, nationality, age, and we talk to each other in a different way. And I think just how we talk to each other is one of the key issues.
And also we can see differences when recruiting, when we have our team members asking for perhaps a specific age to complement the group. So it's working the whole way, which is very nice to see.
And lessons learned at last. What have we seen? Yeah, the more we do, the more we learn, the more we realize that we don't know so much. We are just learning on the way.
And most of the time people talk about quantity when it comes to diversity, not quality in what they have achieved. And unfortunately, that is only diversity on paper. But the big question is, how do we work with inclusion of the diversity?
And here we come to our own leadership, because we have to take a stand by ourselves before we can get out and talk to other in these questions, what we have learned, because you get quite a lot of questions and people who take stands for something that is different, in a bad way maybe, but also very often different in a good way. And you have to handle this, and it's you grow as we are going forward.
People should be allowed to be genuine, to be who they are, but never on the expense of others.
And
So
that is the big thing that we're working for here.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sandra, Lars-Erik and Ann, for your really interesting presentation, and congratulations for your good work. So now I'm sure that you all have a lot of questions. I will now stop the recording, so we will